Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is I, Liam, and I haven't made a podcast for a while, and so today's the day that I'm doing that. And I'd like to acknowledge all the humans or whoever you may be listening to this, whether you identify as human, whether you identify as non-binary, transgender, gay, straight, black, white, yellow, green, blue, whatever the fuck. Hello and welcome to my podcast, and thank you very much for tuning in. That word tuning always gets me, because there's this Tesla quote, and lots of so-called and people who have been praised and hailed as geniuses throughout time have a lot of them tend to have this belief that our brain we are simply energetic beings, right? And that our brain and our minds are like antennas, and when we attune them to the correct frequency, we can live, or we can download ideas, and we can also live in accordance with nature and live the best way in our happiest life that we can, which is basically the search and the seeking mission that I've been on, whether subconsciously or now consciously, my whole life. And it's taken me to great high places of euphoria and ecstasy and joy, and it's also taken me to extreme lows like depression, severe anxiety, debilitating anxiety, and just suicidal tendencies at times in my life. But what I'm finding out, what I'm realizing, what I'm learning is that in life, it's like the yin and yang. And I've always been drawn to Eastern wisdom, Eastern philosophy. And what I'm learning is that between the yin and yang, we have what the Taoists would call the Tao. And that is the balance, that is the equilibrium, that is, in Western science, they might call it homeostasis, which is simply our bodies and ourselves, our beingness being in harmony with nature. And what I've also found is that homeostasis, balance, harmony, all of these things are actually our natural nature, and it is only us in our behavior, which over the last, especially since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, has become exceedingly out of alignment with that nature, with our fundamental way in which we can live, so that we're not, pushing things to the extreme and therefore causing ourselves to feel all these amazing pleasures, but also these terrible lows and things that we see in society, like with people taking out mass killings and genocides and hectic wars that have happened over the last 150 years, the biggest in history. But we're also living in a time where we have the highest life expectancy in recorded history, and our health is overall, due to that statistic, tends to be much higher. And we have also, at this time, in comparison to the amount of people on the planet per capita, like, we also have the most peace that human history has ever recorded as well. But why is it that we don't feel like, that might be all a comforting statistic and whatnot, but why is it that we don't feel like life is that way, and life is so peaceful and easy and effortless, and why is it that we feel so? We're living also in a time of major stress and anxiety. Depression is up. All these mental health issues that are arising in today's society. Why is it that is so? That's a good question. I think we should all ask ourselves, and just a good way to ponder the nature of life at its essence in this day and age. So today I was been listening to a really cool little video on YouTube titled Owning Your Own Shadow, The Dark Side of the Psyche. And it's obviously Carl Jung was all into that, and I've always been fascinated in Carl Jung and his philosophies and his life and what he was able to contribute to psychology and psychoanalysis and whatnot. And he's talking about the paradoxical nature of reality and the paradoxical nature of life. And this is something that I've been very interested in, and I've written a number of essays and whatnot on it. In Buddhism, they talk about non-duality and duality. So duality, of course, is just the nature of opposites, which is basically, in my experience, and I would say from what I've heard, everyone else seems to experience the same thing in life on Earth, and that is that for everything that there is also an opposite to that thing. And that is the paradoxical nature of our existence here on Earth. And there was a cool quote from a guy called Robert A. Johnson, who wrote a book called Owning Your Shadow. And he says, we are presently dealing with the accumulation of a whole society that has worshipped its light side and refused the dark, and this residue appears as war, economic chaos, strikes, racial intolerance. The front page of any newspaper hurls the collective shadow at us. We must be whole whether we like it or not. The only choice is whether we will incorporate the shadow consciously and with some dignity, or do it through some neurotic behavior. I thought that was quite fascinating, because I think that's quite accurate, and I think that's what we are seeing today. That we have, since Jesus walked the earth, and since Christianity has become the main religion in the Western world for the last 2,000 years, we have been worshipping and embracing only our light aspects of our nature. We've been, if anyone does anything that's of the so-called darkness, like something negative that we might perceive as negative or wrong ethically and morally, then we are quick to denounce them, and and then that therefore has become part of our own nature within our own psyches and our own way we perceive ourselves, and we're very critical of ourselves, and I know I am. But so we praise anyone who's doing anything good. They're heroes, they're gods, they're beautiful, messiahs, they're prophets, they're amazing people. But anyone who does anything bad, we can judge them so harshly that society will look down on them. We will online on the computer, we'll go on social media and we'll curse them and judge them and say all these horrible things about them because they did something that society sees and the culture sees as wrong. But do we not realize that when we do that, when we criticize these people, when we harshly judge them, and when we, say that, fuck them, go to hell, whatever we say, do we not realize that all things that human beings have done, can do, and do are things that we also within ourselves are capable of? Do we not realize that anything that is possible that a human being can do, we can also do? And therefore, to judge another is to judge ourselves. And that's what leads me to this concept of non-duality and embracing the wholeness of life in its negative and its positive. The Buddha said that suffering is an inescapable part of life, and that to live is also to embrace suffering. But there are ways that we can live, hence living in accordance with nature and attempting to remain in homeostasis and being in a harmonious balance with the way that life is. Therefore, to understand the nature of reality, we can therefore live in that way and minimize the suffering. And that is what the Buddha taught. And I've also been looking into what is spoken in the Bible, the 7 deadly sins, and I thought that was very fascinating to look at what they are. And what I found was that to live, if you were to not sorry, I'm just trying to find the screenshot of that. Where is it? So if we were to not sin, or to not indulge in any of those 7 deadly sin behaviors that they talk about, which I'm going to bring up and read out in 1 second. Here they are. So the 7 deadly sins are lust, which is unrestrained sexual craving. There is gluttony, to overindulge, especially by overeating, but there's many other indulgences that you could indulge in to be called a glutton. There's pride, which is an inflated sense of one's accomplishments. There's sloth, laziness, lack of effort. Wrath, uncontrolled feelings of hatred and anger. There's greed, the excessive desire for material things. And there's envy, jealousy towards another's happiness. And if we abstain from these 7 deadly sins, as they're spoken of in the Bible, the Christian Bible, what I've found is that there's no way to avoid being in a state of basically balance and harmony and peaceful, and all these things that we consider and we look at and aspire to as positive and holy and spiritual and whatnot. They're actually states of humanity, which is, they're actually our natural states. But the way that we are living today, whilst yes, we might have very high life expectancy and quality of life is up and all these wonderful things, also the way in which we are living is exacerbating the mechanization, the industrial nature of civilization at the moment. Since the Industrial Revolution came about, it's also the factories and all this. That's not that all these man-made things that exist in our society that we all have come to need and to use to live and to get by. They're not necessarily in accordance with the nature of reality and all of that. So, like, what I'm thinking about right now is that we are 70% water at least, we know, and look at the way that our water that we drink and consume and bathe in and whatever else, look at the way that water is carried around and funneled through these pipes, and it's not healthy. And I think that could be honestly, I genuinely think, having looked into a lot of Masaru Emoto's work on water and all these other physicists and biologists and whatnot, I think that water and the lack of care that in our treatment of water could be exacerbating our mental health problems, and therefore leading to most of the issues that we are seeing in today's society. And I think that if we were to treat water, as simple as that is, it's one of the most simple, fundamental, elemental aspects of nature. It's simply hydrogen and oxygen combined in a certain molecular structure that makes up 70% of what we are, and around that same stat for what the earth is. Therefore, water is absolutely essential, and it's a necessity, and we must treat it as though it was that too, which we haven't been doing for a long time. And therefore, why is it a surprise that there's so much mental health issues in society? I don't think it is at all. Anyway, so there's that. So going back to the paradoxical nature of reality, I read that quote earlier, and I'll go back to that. That's what I want to talk about further now. Just looking for the quote itself. Where was I? Far out. Where is it? Anyway, can't seem to see it, but I thought it was quite interesting. It's what's crazy is that I was listening to a podcast on synchronicity yesterday, or a documentary on synchronicity and Carl Jung and coincidence. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about it like this, but coincidence is at least two incidents occurring coincidentally, like two incidents coexisting together at the same time. That's like what a coincidence is. And then synchronicity is things that are coincidental but also hold a pattern of meaning, and therefore we can, if we're conscious enough and aware enough, we can see that these things that are unfolding seem to have an unfolding meaning within them, and that there's a pattern emerging. And that could be due to our perceptions on reality, that could be due to our mental state, that could be due to simply nature unfolding in a way that we are seeing a meaning of how things are going and the flow of life. But and then I watched this other one today on the paradoxical nature of reality and the dark side, and embracing, the yin and yang and our darkness and our light and blah blah blah, and the opposites and all that, which is the nature of the reality, the world we live in. So I wrote this on that on Saturday. I wrote this. All human beings are paradoxical by nature, in the way we live, in our experience of reality, in the words we use to describe our experiences of life itself. To deny the fact that in our three-dimensional world we all reside within here on Earth, there is not an opposite for all phenomena we encounter in our experience of inhabitants here, we would be deluding ourselves of the truth. Everything is connected, we are all a part of the whole, but in saying that, to be a part is to be a fragment, a player in the universal game of totality, a piece amongst the puzzle of all that is, of everything in existence. Until we acknowledge all of this, are we able to begin to understand that by acting with a divisive and separation-based mentality, as though we are all out for ourselves and that everything we do is based on the premise, every man for himself, the consequences will never bring us the fulfillment of our desires. If we realize that all of our personal, self-centered desires and the way we attempt to fulfill them by way of sense gratification are in the end always going to be a letdown, we then must ask ourselves another question. Just how will we ever achieve true and lasting contentment, satisfaction, and fulfillment? Is it by relinquishing the selfish, egotistical aspect of our natures and the cravings for the pleasures which fulfilling our desires bring us, and by therefore adopting a mentality of selflessness? The question we should be asking, if we are truly to attain lasting contentment, satisfaction, and fulfillment, is how may I best assist my fellow human beings today? Through giving, helping, assisting, and serving others for their benefit, with kindness and compassion as our genuine intentions for doing so, this is the only way we will ever come to true happiness or close to it. Sense gratification and pleasure through the satisfaction we receive from indulgence of desire never last. Service to others, self-sacrifice in order to help others, kindness and compassion, these are the true ways to achieve lasting happiness. I'm going to leave it there today because I'm sick of hearing myself talk. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. In the words of Jim Carrey, so long.